Okay, kid. 1:28 in the morning, and I just had another stroke, it appears. But it's been intermittent on one side of my body. This one was on the right side, which would indicate then that the occlusion, or whatever it is occurring in the left hemisphere of my brain. There was a visual aberration where I was looking at a hand that I couldn't influence it, and I didn't know where it was or why it refused to respond to my desires. This could well be part of the oxygen deprivation brought about by the emphysema. Everything else seems to be functioning normally. It seems to have abated for the moment, and that means right now it's 5 minutes into the occurrence, whatever it is.
You've just heard a recording made by my birth father, John Harrison, who I never met. I received this recording 3 years after he died. Who was this man who helped give me life? Why did he have an audio recorder next to his bed at 1:28 in the morning? What makes him want to document this stroke in such detail? And who is this recording for? He was a mystery to me. And I am only now learning about him and what I have inherited from him purely through sound recordings.
Who knows? This may be my last will and testament.
Welcome to Reimagined Radio, a program about sound-based storytelling. With each episode, we explore how dialogue, sound effects, and music can engage your listening imagination and promote storytelling. Here to tell you about this episode is John Barber, producer and host.
Thank you, Rylan. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This episode is called My Hands Are Different. It's written and produced by Martin J. Gallagher, an independent music composer and sound designer based in Portland, Oregon. We featured Martin's work earlier this year in the episode Waters and Ruins, 2 short stories, each framed by music. And the Waters remembers William Sam Gregory, a Portland playwright and poet who died in 2024. The Ruins of Mariupol, a response to the Russian invasion and destruction of Mariupol, Ukraine, is a 3-part string quartet by Vancouver composer Daniel Trushoff. This time, Martin shares a personal and poignant memoir about finding his birth parents. Thank you for listening as Reimagined Radio presents My Hands Are Different, written and produced by Martin J. Gallagher. Martin Gallagher was adopted when he was 6 months old. He discovered and met his birth mother when he was 30 years old. His birth father died before Martin could meet him. Martin learned about his birth father through interviews with friends and a box of tape recordings. The influence of both his fathers and their focus on Martin's hands is an underlying theme. Martin's adoptive father wants him to use his hands to, quote, stand up for himself, end quote. He gives Martin boxing gloves and a training schedule. Martin's birth father, a mystery until after his death, has inspired Martin's hands for a career in music and creative media. This is a poignant story, a memoir, a coming-of-age tale, a journal of discovery and enlightenment. As a tagline for this episode, we say, 2 fathers, two paths, one realization. As you will hear, Martin learns how both his fathers influence his life and combine to make Martin the unique and talented individual he is. Let's listen now to My Hands Are Different, written and produced by Martin J. Gallagher.
Prologue. As an adoptee, I have two sets of parents. I have the family that I mostly grew up with, the Gallaghers, who lovingly adopted me when I was 6 months old. I will refer to them respectfully as my step-parents, Martin and Ruth. But I have another set of parents who were a mystery to me for 30 years. These are my biological parents, who I will refer to as my birth parents, John and Mary. They were not married. This story of discovery is told in 4 parts. Part 1 is about my childhood and what I thought I knew about my father. Part 2 is about the friction that comes in adolescence. Part 3 is a brief history of adoption in this country and why it made my discovery so difficult. And Part 4 contains recordings that helped me discover John and the genetic influence hidden in my life. My story is all about nature and nurture, about characteristics that are wired in at birth and behaviors that were taught to me as a child so that I could survive and make my way in the world. But nature and nurture are different. It's like the clay that a potter uses, and the pattern that the potter tries to put on that clay. If the clay is not familiar to the potter, the pattern may turn out a little fuzzy, out of focus. And as I grew and became my own person, my personality and sense of myself was also a little fuzzy and out of focus. These things would take a lifetime to discover and bring into focus. Part 1. As a child, the person I thought of as my father.
Oh, I had a hat when I came in, and I hung it on the rack. And I love a hat when I go out, or I'll break somebody's back. Now, I'm a peaceful man, I am, and I don't like to shout. But I had a hat when I came in, and I love a hat when I go out.
That was a tape recording of my stepfather, Martin Harold, singing in 1959. He had bought a reel-to-reel tape recorder to document the voices of his family. And when there was a family party, everyone had to turn on the tape recorder. It was a novelty. No one in my family had ever heard their own voice like this. Do I really sound like that? So let's listen to that song again. Remember, this is at a family party at night, and the folks are lubricated by strong drink to loosen up.
Oh, I had a hat when I came in, and I hung it on the rack. And I love a hat when I go out, or I'll break somebody's back. Now, I'm a peaceful man, I am, and I don't like to shout. But I had a hat when I came in, and I love a hat when I go out.
Did you notice that line about, or I'll break somebody's back? It is sung in jest, but remember, blue-collar Irish learned to take no guff from anyone. This was the first song that my father ever taught me. The message was, stand up for yourself, be a man, and don't take any guff from anyone, sung with a smile. Let's move forward in time. Now it is Christmas, 1961. I am 10 years old. The family is opening up presents around the Christmas tree, and my stepfather gives me a gift that he feels is very important.
From Daddy.
Can't open it till you tell us what it is.
Come on, Marc, tell us.
I don't know.
Well, come on now.
I don't know.
Come on, make a guess. What do you call them, Marc?
Vacuum gloves.
Now if you got problems, then you'll fight them out. We'll practice. Only practice, Marc, that's all. Practice the art of self-defense.
After Christmas, my stepfather gave me instructions for practice. I was to go down to the basement and with my new boxing gloves beat and punch his old Merchant Marine rucksack filled with sawdust. I was to do this for 20 minutes every night. After that, I was to take off the gloves and punch the rucksack with bare fists for 10 minutes to build up calluses on my knuckles. I did not like this practice. While it did let me blow off steam from time to time, this practice was the first indication of just how different in nature my stepfather and I were. I was a slender kid, and I had the usual fear of getting into fistfights at the schoolyard. My stepfather was a big barrel-chested Irishman. His grandfather had been a blacksmith back in Ireland and was known as the Hammer. My stepfather thought that learning how to fight would help me stand up for myself. Once, he said to me, "Fight as hard as you can. Even if you'll lose the fight, they will never want to fight you again." The boxing gloves were followed up by barbells a couple of years later. Martin Sr. was an electrical engineer at a steel mill, a trade he learned in the Merchant Marines. He tried to teach me basic electrical projects, wiring a light switch, wiring up a working thermostat to turn on a light, making a basic electrical motor. These projects were okay, and I enjoyed them. But what really got my attention was using his tape recorder. I recorded songs from the TV. I made up silly recordings with my friends.
Hello, nice, kind people out there. This is one day after Thanksgiving, on the night before we have dinner. We have Kevin, Hoojamafloppet. and Martin Gallagher. A little sketch that we were going to put on. I will be known as Marta Louie, and Kevin will be known as Kevin Louie, and all that razzmatazz and jazz.
And I started recording my piano playing. I started asking for piano lessons at 7 years old, 3 years before the boxing gloves. My piano teacher was a classical pianist who told me to pay attention to my hands. Don't crack your knuckles, keep your fingernails short and well-groomed, and do your fingering exercises to develop hand posture, dexterity, and independent hand movements. Needless to say, the hands of a piano player are not the same as the hands of a street fighter. During a drive one evening with the family, there was a string of cars coming toward us on the street. The fifth car in line had his bright lights on. Dad turned on his bright lights to get the fifth driver to dim his. The first four cars flashed their bright lights at us. My stepfather said bitterly, "I'll fight them all just to get to that one with the bright lights on." You can see that behaviors like this that my stepfather had were very useful to him as a street scrapper who stood up for himself easily and quickly in any encounter. That was useful in establishing boundaries. However, it inhibited his career. He was always more comfortable around machinery than people. Part 2. As an adolescent, the dissonance begins. Do you ever feel that you don't quite fit with the world, with other people? That if you could just do things differently or act differently, be someone else's idea of normal, that would smooth everything over and make everyone like you more. Please understand, I will never complain about my life with the Gallaghers. Any alternative life possible would have been institutional life. My adopted parents were fine people. I was carefully brought up as their own and given a university education. I received opportunities which I'm sure I wouldn't have received from my birth parents. Although I have no idea what my life would have been if my mother had kept me, I have never doubted that I fared better by being adopted. However, in adolescence, I started to feel friction between my natural inclinations and the teachings of my adopted family. I gravitated to music and started playing in a rock band with my friends. My step-parents were not especially musical, and they thought that this rock and roll music and the time spent with the band was a bad influence on me. During this time, I was struggling in high school. I flunked out in my senior year from a private Catholic high school. My family knew that I was failing, and they didn't know what to do about it. They assumed that I was lazy and unfocused, that I didn't apply myself with self-discipline, and that it was all the fault of that rock and roll band. During an argument with my stepfather about something, I don't know what, he pulled me into the backyard and said that we were going to have it out. His way of dealing with frustration in his own life was to become aggressive and belligerent. My nature was to avoid direct confrontations, so I turned and I walked away. I was no street fighter. Soon after that, I left home. I got a job, moved into an apartment with high school friends, and bought my first car. I was 17. My life got better after leaving home, and I eventually graduated from college with a degree in television production. I also continued playing keyboards in pop music bands. But my journey was only beginning.
You're listening to My Hands Are Different, an episode of Reimagined Radio. Time for a short break while I tell you about The Fusebox Show. Produced by Marc Rose, Milt Keynes, and Jeff Pollard, each episode of The Fusebox Show features a full course of what they call ear food, wit-slathered conversation and commentary about current events and contemporary culture. Here's a sample.
Fusebox. Did you know there are tiny aliens living in the dishwasher? And at night, when you're sleeping, they carefully sneak out of the dishwasher and slide down the estranged and desiccated spaghetti tendril, and then commence to eat all your cereal.
Is that where all my Weetabix went?
Catch Fusebox on KXRW every Friday at 10 p.m. and on KXRY the third Friday of the month at 5 a.m.
Learn more and subscribe to the podcast at the Fusebox Show website, thefuseboxshow.com. This is Reimagined Radio. Our episode is My Hands Are Different. It's written and produced by Martin J. Gallagher, an independent composer and audio producer based in Portland, Oregon. In the first part of his story, Martin has unraveled different influences from his adoptive father, Martin Harold Gallagher, and decided that what he has learned does not fit what he feels. Martin's search for his birth parents takes on a new importance. Let's continue listening to My Hands Are Different by Martin J. Gallagher.
Part 3. The Search for My Birth Parents. Searching for birth parents was not a pressing, overarching concern. But I was curious enough to take this next step in my life. In 1979, I had a chance encounter with a 70-year-old woman who immigrated to America many years before and became a U.S. citizen. She told me about her difficult search for her birth parents in Europe. She suggested I contact Gene Patton at Orphan Voyage, a national clearinghouse for information about open records laws state by state and the legislative efforts to establish open records for adoptees and birth parents. This chance encounter guided me on my journey. Gene Patton was a seminal figure in the adoptive rights movement, the movement to allow birth parents and birth children to reconnect. She herself was an adoptee, and she searched for and found her birth parents. She published The Adopted Break Silence in 1954, which collected stories of 40 adult adoptees. This book began the discussion of the concept of so-called illegitimate births by scholars and adoptees. If the birth was not authorized by law or not in accordance with accepted legal standards or religious rules, then what rights should be given to children born out of wedlock and their birth parents? Beginning in 1950, Patton dedicated herself to advocating for adoptees and facilitating meetings between birth parents and adoptees. She personally counseled thousands of adoptees and birth mothers on how to begin their searches, and in 1980, she personally advised me on how to search for my birth parents. Even with help, discovery and connection with birth parents was not easy. Janet Bowman is a retired social worker with the Department of Human Services in Multnomah County, Oregon. She tells the story of a particular young unmarried woman who was pregnant in Ohio during the middle of the last century. She explains what it was like for that special young woman.
It's 1950. Marty's birth mother, Mary, is 15 years old, pregnant, and not married. She has 3 options. First, marry the birth father, an Army trainee she met in Clarksville, Tennessee, outside Fort Campbell, Kentucky. That's what Mary's mother wants. Second, have an abortion, which Mary's grandmother wants. Remember, this is 1950, and this will be an illegal backroom abortion. Mary is going against both wishes to choose the third option, to bring the baby to term. This is quite a decision for a 15-year-old to make. In December 1950, Mary goes to the Florence Crittenden Home for Unwed Mothers in Cleveland, Ohio. She lives in the home for 4 months, and in April, she gives birth to an infant son, whom she christens John, named after his birth father. Organized as a branch of the National Florence Crittenden Mission, the home cares for 15 unwed mothers during pregnancy and for them and their infants for 6 months after delivery. It stresses the redemptive benefits of motherhood. There are social mores and attitudes surrounding these pregnancies. So the mission guarantees anonymity and emphasizes spiritual reclamation. A matron manages daily activities. Part-time nurses and a visiting physician provide medical care, and volunteers from women's organizations supply auxiliary services. Catholic Children's Services, now called the Diocese of Cleveland Catholic Charities Adoption Services, facilitates adoptions. When Marty is 6 months old, he is adopted by Martin and Ruth Gallagher and christened Martin John. In 2010, researchers estimated that there are about 5 million adoptees in the United States. To imagine it, think of all the people who live in Oregon and Alaska. About that many adoptees are alive in America today. There are several common reasons why adoptees or birth parents search for their birth relatives. They may need legal information on the circumstances of the adoption. It may be urgent to have medical history information. They may want general family information or to know about family traits and personalities. Finally, they may long to reestablish a connection. This search takes time and determination. There are many roadblocks to getting information. First, adoption statistics are not gathered in an organized manner. Public adoptions through child welfare and the foster home system, and international adoptions, in which the children are considered immigrant orphans, are tracked by government agencies. Private adoptions, through agencies or within families or by private decision of the birth family, might never be counted or reported. State agencies who learn of these may report them voluntarily. However, when a child is born, there is a birth certificate filed with the government. That brings us to the next obstacle, state laws. There are 50 states, plus Washington, D.C. There are 51 different laws governing access to birth and adoption records. Ohio has open access for people born before 1964. But when Marty travels to Columbus, the Ohio state capital, to get his birth certificate in 1980, he learns that there is a problem. The Ohio legislature is in the process of passing a law to restrict access. That puts Marty's request in a gray area. The state records officer suggests this. Go into the next room. I will pull up your birth record card and leave the room. You may not write anything down, but read carefully and remember as much as you can. When you come back out, I'll have pencil and paper for you to write down what you remember. The kindness of the records officer helps Marty locate his birth mother. She helps him learn the name of his birth father, John. But John lives in Idaho, which has different records laws. John's Idaho birth record is sealed for 100 years. John's death record is sealed for 50 years. So Marty's search for John is delayed for 35 years.
Part 4. Nature clicks into place. Jean Patton helped me start my journey to reconnect with my birth parents. She referred me to a sympathetic paralegal. This man had access to privileged records not available to most of us. After some digging, he sent me the address and phone number of a person who he believed to be my birth mother. Believed to be. This statement is important because he said that he could only give me an educated guess at the identity of this woman, but that I would have to make the final determination if she was my birth mother or not. After writing an introductory letter to Mary, she responded. Thanks to a chance encounter with a 70-year-old woman at a party, and thanks to Jean Patton, I was able to begin a warm and rewarding reconnection with my birth mother, Mary. I was 30 years old. Mary sent me a photo of herself with a group of people. She did not put a circle around her face to ID it. But I was shocked at the photo and knew right away that this was my birth mother. I had never seen a person who looked like me, and Mary looked just like me. Soon, Mary and I met in person. She told me what she could remember about the brief and sweet affair with John. They met during a warm, sultry summer in Tennessee, near the Fort Campbell Army Base. John was a handsome soldier training to go off to the Korean War, and Mary was a pretty and smart young girl living away from home with her grandmother. She told me that John was from Idaho, and more importantly to me, he was a piano player and a singer. I sat in stunned silence. I felt doors opening in my mind, brain connections being severed and reconnected differently, and an unfamiliar joy settling around me. 30 years of confusion and self-doubt started dropping away. I had to learn more about this man. But John and Mary never married after their brief and sweet affair. And John was from Idaho, and Idaho had very different rules about adoption records. The big break came courtesy of DNA. In 2017, I mailed my DNA sample to Ancestry.com. About 1 year later, a distant genetic cousin, a third cousin, and I connected and talked about searching for my birth father. She was an enthusiastic researcher of her family tree. She mentioned that there was a friend of my birth father who I should talk to. She had found him on a funeral guest book. Funeral guest books are considered public record. So, in 2019, I traveled to Boise to interview this friend, Dexter. He generously agreed to meet me and also allowed me to record our conversation at a restaurant. So here we are on a Tuesday, the 19th of February.
Yep, 2019.
And I'm meeting Dexter. I brought my laptop so you can see how this developed.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how that connection was made.
Yeah.
One of his relatives? Is that how you...
A third cousin, if you could believe that.
Oh, yeah. So a third cousin, huh?
A third cousin. She took DNA tests, and a number of people in her family took DNA tests, and she shot me a note. It's all anonymous. It's all with...
Thank you.
It's all with handles. It's all with usernames, so she didn't know my name or anything like that. I asked him many questions about John Harrison. As I listened to Dexter describe John, I kept finding so many parallels between John's life and my own. Here are some excerpts from our conversation. Remember, John and I never met one another, but our lives had parallel arcs. Do you see any family resemblance?
You're bald.
Yes.
John was bald.
Yes, I'm bald. Baldness is a genetic trait.
I would guess 5'11".
Yeah, that's about what I am.
Skinny guy.
Yeah, I was pretty slender my whole life.
Had pale blue eyes.
I have pale blue eyes, another genetic trait. How'd you meet him?
I met him at a television station.
Really? In Boise?
In Pocatello.
In Pocatello?
I work at a station called KPVI.
Mm-hmm.
And John was a master control operator at KPVI.
A master control operator? What's that do?
Well, he's the guy that sits and plays back the shows and commercials.
My degree is in television production, and one of my early jobs was as a master control operator. Would you say he was kind of an opinionated guy?
Yeah, that would be one way to describe John. Yeah, hyper opinionated might be.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He wasn't always the person who would compromise or keep his opinion to himself.
Okay.
When it best suited him, he had a hard time determining that. So.
I have been known to have firm and loud opinions of my own.
He was very, very smart, and knew about a lot of things. I mean, he had many fields of study that interested him, and he spoke very eloquently about those things that he was passionate about. Yeah.
I don't know about smart or eloquent, but I have had many interests in my life.
I'm, choir boy in Catholic church.
I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic grade school and Catholic high school, and sang as a choir boy. Finally, Dexter suggested that I travel to meet another friend of John's, Kirk. Kirk and John met at a party thrown by a woman who they were both interested in, but when they went to the party, the woman was forgotten and they became fast friends. Kirk allowed me to record our conversations. I found I had even more similarities with John.
He liked gadgets. He was a gadget man. And so usually when I'd go over there, he'd have something I hadn't seen before that he'd taken apart or was playing with, and I could see that.
Yes, I enjoy gadgets. My studio is filled with them.
You know anything about his dad? I think he was a Baptist preacher. And John told me that he used to take him to the different congregations to sing. And I think he sang solo, and I think he was a boy soprano.
I sang soprano in Catholic church choirs when I was in grade school. Kirk then gave me the hard drive from John's computer. This was an incredible gift. On it were John's music collection, his writings, and most importantly, conversations with Kirk. Just normal friends talking together, unedited and unrehearsed. I began to learn more about him.
I don't know, it's funny. I've always been severely inhibited because I had so many conflicting messages in my skull. It's against God's laws. Why do people talk about, oh my God, sex is terrible. Did you see that chick? Some of them, Jimmy Swaggart, sitting in the front seat of his car while there's a girl sitting beside him, and he can look at her, oh boy, isn't that just terrible? And he turns right around and preaches all this from the pulpit. Oh, come on. What is this?
Yes, he was pretty opinionated, and he didn't keep those opinions to himself. And he therefore went through a number of jobs. But this was his character, and there are elements of that character at play throughout my life also. Dexter and Kirk told me several stories about John. I'll include them here with the help of Marc Rose, host and producer of the Fusebox Show on Apple Podcast. He'll narrate for us.
A story about John Harrison. He had an interesting sense of humor. John owned a bar in Denver, Colorado back in the 1980s. In the bar was a phone booth. Being an audio engineer, John hooked up a speaker in the ceiling of the phone booth. Connected to the speaker was an audio cart machine, something like a tape recorder. The audio cart machine had 5 different ambient sound effects. A customer would come up to the bar and say, "Hey, John, I need to call my wife." And John would say, "Okay, where are you right now?" And the customer would say, I guess I'm at the doctor's office." So John would punch up the ambience of a doctor's office, play it through the speaker in the phone booth, and then his customer would call his wife and say, "Sorry, honey, I can't be home right now. I'm still at the doctor's office."
In today's social environment, this story would seem a bit rude or even misogynistic, but I would guess that John was trying to curry favor with his bar customers, and he obviously used his talent for gadgets and his knowledge of audio to rig up a system to suggest different environments. And I do the same thing in my sound designs for live theater, creating different settings and environments on stage. This is crucial to telling a story rich with meaning and circumstance. Another wonderful gift in these recordings is a peek into John's medical history. Throughout most of my life, when a doctor asked me for family medical history like, "Do you have a history of cancer in your family?" I had to say, I don't know. I'm adopted. So I couldn't give the doctor any information about markers that might indicate future health problems to look out for. Here's another audio clip where John talks about his health.
How's your breathing been lately?
Not too good.
Is that right?
Neither here nor there. To be expected. I haven't been plagued with many allergies most of my life.
You still have this?
Oh.
Yeah, you said you'd had a pain in your side for the first time.
Oh, well, I think I've discovered what it is. It's a combination of factors. Poor muscle tone, lack of exercise, old injuries, and age. Lying in bed, last week was a bitch because I don't have any more oxycodone from the surgery on the skin cancers.
This recording is so important to fill in my family medical history. First, I am lucky that I've never had problems with allergies. I don't get hay fever or pollen allergies. Next, remember the first recording at the beginning of this program where John mentions emphysema? He thinks emphysema may have caused the stroke. I'm going to have to watch out for that in my future. Next, a medical friend of mine thinks that when John made this recording, he was suffering from opioid withdrawal, as this recording was made before the days of opioid lawsuits and regulation. He was taking this medication, oxycodone, to alleviate the pain of skin cancer treatment. I also have to watch out for skin cancer, as I've already had a small bout of it due to my fair skin. Family medical history is important.
Another story about John Harrison. John wanted all of his friends who smoked cannabis in the 1970s to save their seeds and give them to him. He wanted to put these seeds into a large jar. Then he wanted to fly an airplane over the nearby river and drop the seeds from the airplane. In the springtime, when the pot plants would begin to grow all along the riverbank, he thought it would be hilarious to watch the police go crazy and get muddy trying to rip up all the pot plants.
I've got no comment here.
When I went into radio, the Russians put up Sputnik. The Russians had a vehicle in orbit, and it was broadcasting a signal. It was a minute, you know. And there were special bulletins all over the landscape, and amateur radio operators listening for the signal on so-and-so megahertz and rebroadcasting it on local radio stations. In the middle of all of this, women were calling me up at KSEI Radio and chewing my ass out because they missed an episode of their favorite soap opera.
Another story about John Harrison. John Harrison took a motorcycle tour through the Pacific Northwest one summer. He packed his golf clubs on his motorcycle. He would stop at all these private golf courses and pose as a writer for a fictional Golf Digest magazine. The managers of the golf clubs wanted to make a good impression, so they would arrange for John to play 18 holes with other members of the club. That way, John got to play golf at some very exclusive golf clubs for free.
I saw a photograph of John's house taken back a few years. In the corner of his carport, I spotted a beautiful Honda CBX motorcycle. That was a beautiful machine, 6 cylinders, very fast, with a beautiful sound only a 6-cylinder bike could give. That sound was remarked on in a number of motorcycle journals. I've owned several motorcycles in my life, but none of them as nice as that CBX. And I did quite a bit of motorcycle touring, but no golf clubs. Nah. I've been a musician for most of my life. I started composing when I was in high school. All of the music you've heard in this program was composed and performed by me. I'm happiest in my life when I'm composing and recording. I don't really compose in a particular genre, I just compose what I feel. Nevertheless, some of my music has been heard in television, film, live theater, and radio. But I didn't know that my birth father was a musician. I didn't know my birth father at all before these discoveries. When I heard these next conversations, I sat down hard on a chair and listened closely, for here was my father discussing music. These recordings went straight to my heart.
I'm in some of the same deal right here with 2 pianos, a room full of records, and a wall full of books back there. But his tone is so pure. And he's blind. In the second chorus here, he goes up for an E flat above high C. And it's like nothing at all. He floats right up there and takes that tremendous high note. One of the reasons I enjoy music, I enjoy it so much. I've been singing most of my life. Recitals, quartets. I sang with a 25-piece orchestra here in the Bannock Hotel in Bogatello for 10 years. But the thing is, when you try to play piano and you know how difficult it is, and you know the limits of your own abilities, and then you hear somebody like Chick Corea, or when you hear a singer, years and years of practice and desire.
And then something I never expected to hear. My birth father, John, singing. It brought me to tears. Solid gold.
And now, when twilight dims the sky above, recalling thrills of our love, there's one thing I'm certain of. Return, I will to Brazil.
The next piece of gold.
Life is a cabaret, old son. Come to the cabaret. Come to the cabaret. Come to the cabaret. Come to the cabaret.
Part 5, Epilogue. My birth father died in a 2-room concrete block house in a blighted section of Pocatello, Idaho. He died alone, with no family. His useful body parts were donated to medical research and the rest were cremated. When no one came to claim the ashes, those ashes were thrown in a dumpster and taken to a landfill. John was very talented and skilled and knowledgeable in many areas, but his willingness to go it alone, his unwillingness to compromise, and his hyper-opinionated and narcissistic nature caused him to lose his jobs, his colleagues, and his wives. He finished his life in isolation with no family, besides me, who he never met. I thank John for the basic clay of my nature. Likewise, I thank my Gallagher family for attempting to imprint a stamp on that clay that would allow me to produce something useful in this world. When I think about all the things I inherited from John, I think about the natural characteristics of the man that are hardwired into me, for better or for worse. There are the fears and desires. There are the physical attributes of my body and my mind. And there are the hands. I was not meant to be a street fighter. I was not meant to be a boxer. I was born to work in music and media. My hands are different.
This is Reimagined Radio, a program about sound-based storytelling. With each episode, we experiment with dialogue, music, and sound effects to create storytelling for your ears and imaginations. Here are some examples.
Get out of my head! Wait, is he reading your mind? Is he reading your mind? You can't let him know! Stop him! You gotta stop him!
Shut up! Shut up!
This project, we're playing with fire on this one. The hottest fire you can play with.
Then something went wrong with the car. It stalled right on the tracks. The train was coming closer. I could hear its bell, its cry, its whistle crying. Still, he stood there. Now I knew that he was beckoning me to my death.
Answer me, who is this? Do you realize you're driving me crazy? Who's calling me? What are you doing it for? Now stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
Smoke comes out! Black smoke drifting over the city! People in the streets see it now! People trying to run away from it, but it's no use! They're falling like flies!
What's that old saw? You can take a kid out of the ghetto. Well, now this kid can take the ghetto out.
Reimagined Radio. Nothing to see, everything to hear. Heard Mondays at 1 p.m. New episodes released on the third Monday of the month. Episodes are repeated Sunday evenings at 6 p.m. here on KXRW 99.9 FM.
Upcoming episodes of Reimagined Radio include Frequency 43 in October, another cinematic radio storytelling collaboration by Gerald McGuinn and Marc Rose. They tell a story about the morphing liquidity of dream and nightmare, and how that calls the very rules of what we consider reality into question. Join us for this one. In November, we present D.B. Cooper's Last Interview, sampling a short story by Tom Vandell about what happened to Cooper after he jumped from the back of that jet passenger airplane Thanksgiving Eve more than 50 years ago. In December, Reimagined Radio presents our 5th volume of radio holiday stories. This year, we sample from The Plot to Overthrow Christmas by Erwin Corwin, told in rhyming verse, and A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, starring Lionel Barrymore. More information is available at our website, reimaginedradio.fm. You've just listened to My Hands Are Different, an original work by Martin J. Gallagher, independent music composer and sound designer based in Portland, Oregon. As you heard, Martin had 2 fathers, an adoptive father and a birth father. Martin never knew his birth father. Through difficult research, Martin learned his birth father's name, John Harrison. Martin also learned his birth father had died 4 years earlier, thus preventing any meeting between father and son. Instead, Martin learned about his birth father through conversations with his friends. But the biggest revelations came from a box of sound recordings his birth father had made. Martin hears his father talk about his life, his health, his various careers, and he hears his father sing. The experience is a revelation. Martin realizes that each of his fathers provides models for his life. The differences are located in his hands. His adoptive father wants to train Martin to box, to be able to, quote, take care of himself, end quote. His birth father genetically influenced Martin's hands for music. So now, at last, Martin knows that his birth father's love of music inspires his own creative efforts. My hands are different. 2 fathers, 2 paths, 1 realization. Support for Reimagined Radio comes from KXRW-FM, Vancouver, Washington, KXRY-FM, Portland, Oregon, and the Electronic Literature Lab at Washington State University, Vancouver. Visit our website for more information and listening opportunities for this and all our other episodes, as well as lots of extra information and listening opportunities about radio storytelling. That's reimaginedradio.fm. Reimagined Radio podcasts are available from many distribution platforms. Subscribe to our podcast and never miss an episode. This program includes content copyrighted by Martin J. Gallagher, 2025, and is used here with permission. Additional original music composition and post-production by Marc Rose. Graphic design by Holly Slocum and Evan Leyden. Announcing and social media management by Rylan Eisenhower. Follow Reimagined Radio on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, and especially our YouTube channel, @Reimagined Radio. Reimagined Radio acknowledges the debt we owe to previous and contemporary radio artists, and we hope our curation and stewardship of their artifacts and efforts demonstrates our sincerity. This is John Barber, producer and host. Thank you for listening to Reimagined Radio.
This is a production of Reimagined Radio. To learn more, visit our website, Reimagined Radio, all one word, no punctuation, .fm. Please join us for another episode of Reimagined Radio as we continue our exploration of sound-based storytelling.